working on it. Hi. Sorry about that. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Gigi Nkobo, who's speaking about Is Africa Really Rising? So please put your hands together for Gigi.
The joys of technical difficulties, hey? But sure, hey, we'll do this when we get to where we're going. It's like Africa, actually. I'm serious, you've still got a long way to go. Um, but we made it. We will eventually rise, I promise you. um, so, the myth of Africa rising. When I heard the theme for tedx was Africa Rising, I was absolutely excited. I mean, we've had Africa Rising. We've had so many conversations about it. We've spoken about it in arts. We've spoken about it in education, governance, economics, and for my African Studies news journal, Africa Rising was my theme. And what a news journal is an extensive study or analysis of an article that carries your theme. So I was given a task and I started researching about the rise of Africa. And as I read articles by The Times, The Economist, Forbes, Africa Report, I started to see a trend. All publications tended to rely heavily on statistics to show our rise. I mean, it makes sense. Statistics are numbers. We easily can understand them, hopefully, and so we get that Africa's rising. And they seem to rely on these statistics to show how the people are feeling. And that's where I started to have an issue. But before we get into that, let's just do this so we can figure out if Africa is really rising. Imagine you have two students in class. You've got the A student and you've got the D student. The A student's already at a 95% and the D student's only at a 50%. If you look at the red part of the graph, that's the growth opportunity. And you can see that the D student has a growth opportunity of 50%, whilst the A student has a growth opportunity of only 5%. So only logically, whenever they try to improve their grade, the D student will always have a higher rate of growth. Look at where they're starting. The D student is much like Africa. Anything we do, they tend to amplify. It's always, Africa's rising. Wow, it's Africa's century. We're the hopeful continent. And I'm not saying Africa can't rise, but are we going about it the right way? So let's face our technical difficulties together as we go back. Anyways, so I was going to talk about Africa's rise and disprove the notion using statistics as well. This was the formula that seemed to work for all these media publications, so I was going to follow it. I started to talk to my economics teacher, Mr. Mushi, and I really wanted to get into the economics of it. We started to look at articles by Mackenzie Lines on the Move. We started to crunch the numbers, 1.6 trillion US dollars, Africa's total GDP in 2008. And they said, McKinsey reported that this was equal to Russia's or Brazil's. Excuse the fact that 54 countries are being compared to one. I think that's just a topic for another day. But they also reported that we had a total capital, foreign capital flowing in of about 1.6 trillion, and that things were looking really good. Here's the statistics. We all have them here. But as we read them, I kept on finding a problem. I got the numbers, but I never seemed to understand what was going on. And I just want to ask from the general audience, I'm going to make an assumption here that we've read statistics like this once or twice in our lives. But do we actually know what the 1.6 trillion contributes into our lives? Do we know the impact it has? And if you do know the impact, please raise your hand. I've got about 2 people in the audience who know the impact of our growing GDPs. And that's where my problem with economic data arises. I'm not arguing with the fact that economics are good, but I'm arguing with the fact that just because the economics are good doesn't mean that we as Africans are feeling the rise. And so, the rise of Africa. You see, when I think of the rise of Africa, I think of the rise of the African. Empowered citizens who are actually critical thinkers and can innovate. When I think Africa rising, I think citizens who are employed and are given the opportunity to be employers themselves. I think of children going to school and actually learning from an African curriculum, learning about Africa, learning about the issues that we face, so we're given the opportunity to solve them. We need to learn about our identity, about our culture. I mean, we're living in Africa anyway. When I hear Africa rising, I think of our leaders. I think of ethical governance that has a culture of being ethical to its most important resource. And governance that moves away from thinking that mineral resources are their important resource, but focuses on the people because that's their greatest resource. When I hear Africa rising, I think Africans taking the rise of Africa on and contributing into it. I'm not looking for the Westerners to make us rise. It's time for Africans to create the rise. So, let's go. I've got these dreams, but however, it's just not correlating. Because as an 18-year-old South African, last year I witnessed the Marikana strike, or the Lonmin strike. It's a strike that left 38 people dead and 78 wounded. And people were just striking for salary increases. The Business Insider reports that 7 out of the lowest economies in the world are African. And our poverty line is $1 a day. And it's reported that over 40% of sub-Saharan Africa is still living under $1 a day. And this has stayed constant since 1980. We've hovered around the same place. So, when you look at it, this means that out of a population of 936 million people, over 374 are still living under poverty. And that's statistically. Because, let's make an example with my life. Statistically, I'm not poverty stricken. Because my mom doesn't earn $1 a day, she earns 2. How good for me. This means that in South Africa, she earns 20 rand. But my bus fare to go to school is 20 rand. A loaf of bread is 10 rand, which means to feed a family of 4 children, she can only buy 2 loaves of bread. My grandma, she lives off medication. So, my mom has to now make the choice between sending me or my brother to school. She has to make the choice between feeding us or to keep her mother alive. But technically, we're not living in poverty. And this is the problem. We are living in poverty, although statistics don't reflect it. And that's the African condition right now. GDP-wise, we look like we're rising. But the people aren't feeling it. And this is the part where I'm supposed to give a miracle solution to solve this problem. I could look at how industry is supposed to be created in Africa, so that an industry of chocolate that makes $110 billion US dollars a year can not only give the Ivory Coast people who actually have the raw materials 3%, whereby Ivory Coast can actually start to create an industry whereby they can take their resources and actually use them. They have the factories and the utensils to take their raw materials to create into chocolate and to give it to the world. We know how to add value to our own products. And I think this is admirable, and countries should do it. But then, how can I neglect the fact that we also need to focus on education? I mean, one of the founders of ALA, Mr. Fred Swanica, said this in his TED Talk. He said, Africa is a continent where one good leader can change a nation. And this is very true. So I won't give you right now a miracle solution of how we can fix Africa. 54 countries have different strengths. And I believe that everyone should look at what they have. Tanzania is good with agriculture, let them work on trade deals. Ivory Coast has raw materials, let them work on industry. But the common element with all of this is the African people. They are the driving force behind industry, trade deals, policy, governance, economics. Driving force behind it is the African. So let's teach the African. Let's inspire each other. Africans here watching me, Africans who may watch this on the internet, and Africans who may never see me. Let us all work to our different strengths to contribute to Africa. I want to go into curriculum design, and I want to focus on the African curriculum. But that's my strength. I've got a friend, Mangoba, who wants to go into business, and that's his strength. And if we can all focus on our strengths as countries, as a continent, and also as an individual, and work wholeheartedly into making this our driving force, I believe as Africans, we can contribute to our rise. And once the African rises, the continent will do nothing but follow us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. It was an amazing speech. It's speeches like that that make events like this worth doing. And another amazing speaker that we have coming up is Findile Lamini. She's an external speaker. Many of you don't know her, but pretty sure that you'll be excited to get to know her after the TED Talk is done. Okay? Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's more than an honor and a privilege to be at ALA TEDx. My name is Pindile Dlamini, and I hope that you enjoy the story that I have to tell in sharing my passion and what I believe to be my life's purpose. This is Pindile, 4 years old. Graduation day at the end of nursery school. This is the happiest day of her life, with her whole life ahead of her. She's been privileged in that this school has afforded her the opportunity to understand the diverse nature of our world. She's had the opportunity to work side by side with people of diverse cultures and races. Her passions and pastimes at this stage are ballet, and her best friends are boys. More than anything, Pindile is brought up in a home with a mother and a father. Pindile is fortunate enough in that her parents bring her up in a home where there's love, support, and guidance. Every single day, she's told she's a star. Every single day, she knows the sky is not the limit. Sadly, this is not the case for many African children. Alarming statistics shake me every single day, where I aim not to look at the numbers, because for me, in the communities that I work, these numbers represent people. The overall picture is showing us. We learn that most of the child-headed households in this world come from this continent, where most children are left to fend for themselves, and the average age of the child-headed household is 9. Most of these families have to survive because parents have died because of disease or violence and discourse. Africa, sadly, is also the continent with the largest population. Africa's people are going hungry every single day, where we see alarming rates of how hungry we are, where now we know that 1 in 4 people go hungry every day. I don't know about you, but not having a meal between 5 to 6 hours, I know I'm kaput. Imagine not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. Africa is a very young continent, where 200 million people are between the ages of 15 and 24. For me, that tells a powerful story, and it's a powerful statistics that we need to remember. Our African population also represents 60% of unemployed people being youth. We all know that education serves to help us in advancing social good, and more than anything, opens the door to better economic prospects. Education, coupled with greater job opportunities, is certainly the way that the economies of the world and of Africa can be transformed. This is the face of unemployment in Africa today. In the communities in which I serve, you find people sitting, not knowing what to do or where to go. You find hopelessness, desperate. You find depression and distress. This is a picture of African youth, not knowing where to go or where to look for opportunities. This is an African youth that have no hope for tomorrow, because in their heart of hearts, they know of no future. They know of no plan of how to make things come together so that they can live a prosperous life. Enter the use of drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of all this emotion and all the societal pressure, where we aim to not only feed ourselves, but our families and our families' families. And so on it goes, as Africans do. With abuse of drugs and alcohol, enter crime in our communities. With crime comes violence. Violence in our streets and violence in our homes. This is a vicious cycle of unemployment and abject poverty. But I believe, the pessimist and activist in me firmly and strongly believes that Africa is indeed rising. We know that education, once again, is one of the most powerful instruments for reducing poverty and inequality. It lays a foundation for sustained economic growth. I know that Africa is rising because by the mere fact that we are all gathered here today under the roof of an academy of this world-class nature that stands for excellence and that is proudly and loudly South African, we bear witness to this right now. I believe that Africa is rising because these are the faces of Africa's new hope. These are the faces that represent you and I. These are the faces of skilled young African people who know who they are, who understand where they come from, and more than anything, understand the responsibility they have to go back home in order to plow back and pay it forward to others they've left behind. I believe that Africa is rising because statistics show that from 2000, steadily up until 2014, education access to tertiary as well as secondary levels has increased. As much as it is marginal, there is progress that can be documented and seen. Although that many jobs have not been created because of the enormity of the challenge, we know that we can be part of the solution. I call on us, young Africans, educated and skilled, to come together and really start thinking out of the box. I call for us to come together and to make use of this global village that we now find ourselves in. I call us to come together and not only share how we go about thinking entrepreneurially, but most importantly, how we birth entrepreneurs who are not only able to stand the test of time in their businesses, but most importantly, create opportunities for sustained employment. We need to start creating industries. We need to start creating jobs. 2015 is a significant year in that the United Nations Millennium Development Goals are coming to an end. Actually, from today, there's 1 year and 25 days until the end. In 2000, the world's nations came together and negotiated on these 8 goals. And what they said is that by 2015, they want to halve extreme poverty and eradicate hunger in the world. Our leaders all signed and committed on this. Now that it's coming to an end, the post-2015 development agenda is currently being discussed in various levels within the United Nations, where last week the Secretary General actually released a report on what they're now calling the social development goals. One is an organization that campaigns and advocates for matters that are aligned to advancing the agenda of the Millennium Development Goals, but most importantly, focusing on Africa. One has over 6 million followers across the board, and it comprises of very significant people who stand up and advocate for social good. The CEO and President, Mr. Michael Elliott, wrote last week just briefly commenting on what the social development goals look like. And lo and behold, he said 2015 is a really big deal because he recognizes that Africa has been a priority on the development agenda. And right now, all eyes are on us. People are seeing how far we've come, but most importantly, they're looking to renegotiate the target so that by 2030 we have seen significant improvement. Finance will be allocated to this development, and most importantly, he says access to information is important so that we, as citizens, can hold our governments accountable. He says leaders need to step up right to the front at the beginning of the year so we can start to watch if they can deliver on the promises that they continue to make on international platforms with their colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that Africa is rising because for the past 2 years, this has been the only continent that has been able to give positive foreign direct investment returns. With the working class population on the continent also increasing, we have seen a growing rise in consumer spending as well. I firmly believe that this is a time for us, young, skilled, and educated Africans, to step into the picture and take charge. I believe it's time to call for a rebirth, a revival, a renaissance of sorts. Some may call it a revolution. I call it African pride. We need to acknowledge our heritage and our past, learn from it, and most importantly, we need to look forward into the future, coming together to develop sustainable social solutions for Africans, by Africans. There's a common saying that says, "He who feels knows." And this is a saying that I appeal to you to say you know within your communities, you know within your countries the challenges that you face. Can you take a moment and think of what role are you playing to not only identify the problem, but to start coming up with a solution? I don't know about you, but for me, blame is a time-wasting game. We need to stand up, we need to take action, and most importantly, we need to be proud of who we are and where we come from. We need to become active citizens that don't only realize the responsibility that they hold with the education to take back to the communities and where they come from, but most importantly, we need to start taking initiative. We need to start contributing to these young people who are despondent and desperate to start to change their mindsets and realize the bigger opportunities of the world that we now live in. We need to start participating in our governments. We need to act. We need to mobilize. We need to become responsible citizens of the global world, let alone the continent that we now find ourselves in. We need to be active citizens that engage with authority and leaders to such an extent that they understand that the uniform that they wear represents that they are civil servants and they are there because of us. They are there to serve us, and therefore they are accountable to us. We, ladies and gentlemen, need to organize ourselves as effectively as those who love war. We need to become change makers. We need to be courageous. And most importantly, we need to understand that we are part of a greater collective. As an African, one value that is very true to me is that of Ubuntu, where we say that I am because we are. For me, it's important that we remember this principle in whatever life path that we go through, in understanding the responsibility we have, not only to go back home and plow back, but to build and grow together on this journey. We need to not only start self, but start understanding the issues that our people are facing on the ground so that we can start to intelligently start to come up with those sustainable solutions that can be implementable and work when you're no longer around or when the funding runs dry. We need to stand up and lead. Lead with authority, lead with certainty, and most importantly, lead with honesty. once we step up and take charge, we will then start to inspire others to do the same. This is a call to action from me to you. Call it a cry for help. Call it begging on your knees. Call it what you will. This is me appealing to you and saying, young Africans, all eyes are on us in 2015. The developing world is looking to assist us to advance our goals. It is time for us to start speaking out about our concerns. It's time for us to get up off our seats and start to contribute to those conversations that will start to path the way to a better future for all of us. We need to educate each other. We need to mentor, love, and support in order to give guidance to those who have no support back home. We need to not only help each other build and learn and grow the skills that we need to survive, but we also need to start to think out of the box, entrepreneurially, coming up with our own solutions. Most importantly, I appeal to you to help me start changing mindsets of young Africans, despondent and depressed. We need to go back to our communities and give them hope. We need to show them a better way for a better future for themselves. We need to give them a chance to start to dream, to have a vision. For me, this speaks directly to starting to change the African narrative that we hear. I mean, I went on Google the other day and I was Googling Africa Rising. There we go. And it's depressing. It's depressing to see that if it's not the flies and the smelly, dry, depressed, hungry photos, it's the lions and the trees. There are no photos of victory, no photos of dignity, no photos of pride. I appeal to you, young, educated, skilled Africans, and I say that when all eyes are on Africa and funding is available for us to develop ourselves and our community, let us act responsibly. Let us act with integrity, understanding that the funds that we receive need to go to where we say they need to go to. We need to respect each other, and most importantly, we need to be accountable to each other and for each other. We need to lead authentically and rise together as peers in building this nation of ours. I can tell you that it is then when we rise up and speak with one voice that we will be able to hold our leaders accountable. We will have one powerful voice that will hold them to the words and the signatures and the documents that they sign and they negotiate when they sit there on the international platforms. And that is what I believe will make Africa rise. First and foremost, before I'm Pindile and an African and all the rest of it, I'm a human being. I'm passionate about serving humanity. I'm passionate about seeing people empowering themselves and growing themselves outside of poverty. I'm passionate about seeing people start to have a hope for themselves, their lives, and that of their communities. And it is at this time that I appeal to that human essence within you. And I ask you to rise up, because we are Africa. Gandhi once said it. He said, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. Margaret Mead talks about it in the form of a collective, a group. But the one that I like the most is Steve Jobs in the 97 ad commercial that he spoke on, where he called us the crazy ones. 'Tis at this time that I, Pindile Dlamini, would like to invite you all to join me and the the rest of my crazy crew as we plan to shake up the world in 2015 with sustainable social solutions that will aid in building the capacity that we need for our continent. We will be contributing to rising this continent to where it needs to be. And I implore you to join us on our journey. Thank you very much.
Fools.com exclusive. Nimekuchagua wewe mama, sitaki mwingine, aushi usiniache, usinitende mama, usipende to it. Doing something mean to it. Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it. Scream from the haters. Got a nice ring to it. I guess every superhero need his theme music. No one man can have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. Broken, the school's closed, the prison's open. We ain't got nothing to lose. Everybody we roll. Everybody we roll. It's some light skin girls, it's some jelly rolls. In this white man world, we the one show. So good night, cool world. I see you in the morning. I see you in the morning. It's way too much, I need a moment. No one man can have all that power. The clock's ticking, I just count the hours. Stop tripping, I'm tripping off the power. Get the world's hours. Started. Zombie on the track. Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Hi, that was great. Thank you, Fetch. Up next is Mustafa Lufti speaking on why your idea of diversity is a lie. Please welcome Mustafa.
I don't know why it is a problem for people to pronounce my surname Lutfi, not Lofty, but
Sorry.
it's fine. I got used to it. So, before I start, is that too loud? Check, check. Before I start, I want to ask you a question. I want to know how many people in this room have passion to painting and drawing. Just passion, it's not important to have skills. Just raising hands? Ah, not bad. Okay, so here's the challenge. I just know how many of you can draw and paint this simple picture. Just have the skills to draw and paint this simple picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, about 12. Okay, that's good. So here's the challenge. If I told you that you only have a blue sheet and a blue Sharpie to draw this, and I asked any one of you to say that I can do it. Who can do it from the 12 people who raised their hands? I can see Timina, you are. Okay, I have a brownie for you because I know that's impossible. And I can hear a humming here. Does Mustafa become crazy? I don't know. Okay. When I was a kid, I tried this. I wondered, why do we use too many colors in one single painting? So I decided that I would try the same color of the sheet and the same Sharpie, and I get at the end what you expected. I get nothing. I get blank. I get meaningless. And it was the first time to conclude that a single color could never paint a meaningful picture. Fast forward in grade 10, my English teacher just came into the class and told us, now you are grown-ups, and you should write more deep essays. That's fine, okay. And our first assignment was to write about diversity. Actually, it was a challenge for me because I had never known before that there is a word in English called diversity. So I didn't know where to start. So when I returned back home, very excited to write about diversity, which was I didn't know yet. My first guide was my Oxford Dictionary. Thank God that I have an Oxford Dictionary. What does this tell me about diversity? And I checked what is diversity according to Oxford, and I get please don't tell me that this. No, not that. That dictionary was very helpful. So my dictionary told me diversity, the wide variety of something. For example, cultural and ethnic diversity. So that's good. I have now a good start and a base. So I know that it's about cultures, diversity of cultures, or variety of cultures, and at the same time it could be about ethnic. So that's good. But what else could I do to improve my essay? I had that friend who used to call him the encyclopedia, because whatever the question you would ask him, you would definitely get an answer. So I just, okay, let's call this friend. And I sent this friend a message, please, I have an assignment to write about diversity, help me. And I got an answer, Mustafa, the word diversity, I hear it twice in my life. I hear it by the politicians talking about that they need diversity of target age in the government. And I hear it by activists talking about diversity of gender and job opportunities. So maybe this is something could help you. And I told him, yes, so now I had a better base to go on in diversity. So it's not only about cultures, it could be about gender, it could be about age. That's good. So, do you have any advice to me? He told me, yes. Always ask Google, because Google definitely knows better. So, I asked Google, please tell me what is diversity, but I use Google Images. And they're quite interesting that most of the results, I just picked 2 of the results, but most of the results were like black and white. That diversity is diversity of skin color. So now I'm very satisfied. I didn't know what diversity means, but now I know that diversity could be about gender, age, it could be about skin color, it could be about cultures, it could be about the religions. So now I'm satisfied, and I submitted my essay about diversity. After a couple of days, my life was changing, and my concept to diversity was completely changing. When I met a blind 20 years old guy in the street, he was walking alone, and I had that sympathetic view that, oh my God, the blind man, he must need help. And I offered help, so I walked with him, and I started talking to him. Before I talked to him, I thought that this man needed help. But in fact, he showed me that I'm the one who needed help. I was shocked when I knew that his destination was Bibliotheca Alexandrina. Bibliotheca Alexandrina, for you who don't know, is the largest library not only in Alexandria actually, but in Egypt. And he was going to attend a scientific seminar talking about environmental sustainability. Wow. And I was very curious to know the view of this guy about diversity, because according to me, what I know about diversity, that I can sort people according to skin color, according to gender, according to age, according to culture. But he could not see these things. I asked him, what do you think about diversity? And he told me, I know that I'm blind and I cannot see what you call colors, but I do see people's ideas. So, tell me more what you could see about ideas. He told me, for me, diversity is about ideas, so I see the empowerment of ideas, that combining ideas together could create a solution. And I told him, it's okay, fine. And he told me, just imagine with me a world that all the people are exactly identical. They have the same mind and the same ideas. And he told me, do you know that if this is true, that you could never have your iPhone? I told him, it's fine, I don't have an iPhone. But He just told me, just think for a minute with me. Because we think the iPhone is Steve Jobs. Honestly not. Because iPhone is not only Steve Jobs. iPhone is like a solution through combination of 60,000 people with their ideas working together to offer us one single solution. And imagine that all the people in the world are doctors or engineers. We could never have innovation in other in other things if we have all the people are doctors or engineers or whatever they are. I remember I was like convinced with how true this idea was when I remember this story about my teacher when I was 7. When I was 7, I had a fantastic arts teacher. She was very nice to us, and she used to tell us every single class, kiddies, please just draw whatever I draw on the board. And we used to copy all her pictures. So I thought that she was the best teacher ever. But when I was asked to draw the first image or the first picture from my imagination, I failed. Because we used only to copy, not to create. And I believe that diversity is related to creativity, because when we used to draw only one single image, we didn't have creativity. We failed when we were asked to draw something from our imagination. The same for communities. If the communities are fed by one single thoughts or one single direction of thoughts and ideas, you would get this. You would get lack of creativity. So, I was actually inspired by this quote from Maya Angelou. She said, it's time for parents to teach young people early on that in diversity, there's beauty and there is strength. But I add to this that in diversity, there is creativity. And all of that were linked to my first conclusion of my life that I got when I tried to draw that blue picture with blue Sharpie. That a single color could never paint a meaningful picture. It could be something like this, that a single idea could never paint a creative community. That with only one single idea, it's impossible to reach Africa Rising, as we say. So, we had the old image, the jars. It's like the big pictures, and we needed too many colors or many colors to draw this picture. And it's the same in societies. We have goals, we have big goals we want to achieve. We have Africa Rising. And actually the colors or the ways to achieve this idea is our ideas combined together. Never did I see this very clear more than in Tahrir Square, Egypt, January 2011. We didn't know the power of ideas. Actually, we never thought that we would make something like this. Here, we didn't classify ourselves as religious views or political views or even poor people and rich people. We just classified ourselves as individuals. We know that every individual could contribute to this. And we got a very powerful result. After all of this, I started thinking again about diversity. So I used to know diversity as diversity of color, diversity of religions, gender, blah, blah, blah. And this man told me that diversity is about ideas. And I concluded that as we had certain definition for diversity, this is not the complete image for diversity, because this is a negative definition for diversity, that we see each others according to our colors or our religions or political views. But there's a more positive definition of diversity we could use through thinking about diversity of ideas and thoughts. Africa. Thinking about Africa, I didn't know before whether negative definition of diversity affected Africa or not until I came here to African Leadership Academy. When I started my African Studies class, we were asked to make researches about Africa and get some news, some pieces of news about different aspects, from innovation to conflicts to, it was like a long list. And it it was very easy for me to get from the news bad news about Africa. It was very easy to get news about Ebola because this is the top news about Africa in BBC or CNN, and it was very, very difficult to find news about African impact or Africa rising. And I was convinced that yes, the negative meaning of diversity affect Africa negatively. Because according to BBC or CNN, we are just like, we are one country. We are like black Africa, we are dark Africa, we are poor Africa. Some good news you can find about Africa is the United Nations offered aid to some African countries. And then I asked myself, is Africa rising? And actually I asked myself this question because it's the theme of the day. And I don't know actually, is Africa really rising or not? Because this is not the question for me. The question for me, what should we do as individuals to make sure that Africa is rising? So, we talked about diversity of ideas and how powerful and creative these ideas could make to Africa, and then yes, we are affected by the negative thoughts of the world about Africa, and then Africa rising. So, the first step to assure that Africa is rising is to connect our ideas together. So we need, let's take it from the back. So we need Africa rising, we need to achieve Africa rising. To achieve this, we have to connect our ideas, or we have first to get creative solutions. And we could never get creative solutions without connecting ideas together. And we could never connect ideas unless they are diverse. They are not the same. They will add to each other. So the first step is to connect our ideas together, not as East Africans, North Africans, or black and white. It's like ideas. I don't know. Okay. And returning back to that case of the sameness that we talked about, if Africa, if we are all the same as the world see us, if we are all like under conflict zones and poverty and all of that, we could never achieve anything in this world. Actually, we can talk about people who achieved or won Nobel Prize, African Nobel Prize winners. We can talk about great writers in Africa that we do here. We talk about them. We study for Chimamanda Adichie, for Naguib Mahfouz from Egypt, all of these great writers. And due to during this process, it's more logical if you have a green pen in your hand or a green Sharpie and you want to draw or paint this image, it's more logical to use the green Sharpie. Sorry. It's more logical to use the green Sharpie to draw these trees. It's not logical to use the green Sharpies to like try to draw the sunset view because you would never achieve that. And it's better not to waste time in this and to give the painting to someone else who have that skill or have this color, the yellow color or the orange color, to complete the rest of the image. It's the same for Africa. We have to believe that all of us are unique. Every one of us is like, has something special. So it's not logical for a football player to try to teach people how to play basketball. It's better to teach people how to play football. It's like, this is what you can do. Because when we did this, back in my country, the word successful is only related to doctors and engineers. And this is not true, because if Egypt is only doctors and engineers, we could never do anything. We need other people, we need other ideas, because we believe in ideas. Back to Tahrir Square again. What is important in this process is to learn and try to connect ideas together. But it's more important to keep the goal and know the role of ideas. I will explain this. We talked about that the whole community should have a common goal they want to achieve, which is the big image, and they would not achieve it unless they work together because they have different colors, they have different skills. And if they added these skills and colors together as ideas, they will achieve this goal. When we went far about from this in Egypt and we put our ideas as goals, we started to split and split and split and split again. So till we reached the point that we nearly lost everything we won in 2011. So this is what I want from us as African leaders or as future leaders, not to fall in this trap, not to make our ideas our goals, because ideas could be combined together, forming a one solution. Like iPhone is not an idea, iPhone is a solution, but combining 60,000 ideas together, they got iPhone. And remember, like, I believe unity is different than uniformity, because unity is a combination of ideas together, combination of colors together. It's not important to be the same to work together, but it is important to combine our ideas together. And at the end, I finish with this, that the same as single color could never paint a meaningful picture, a single idea could never transform Africa. Thank you.
Okay, it's not necessary because. Okay, thanks. Um, Good afternoon to everyone. Um, okay, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about to everyone. Okay. With my talk, I seek to answer the question whether is Africa really rising from a perspective of psychology, not biology, psychology. Okay, the rise of Africa is an ideal that has existed for over centuries, and it has been expressed by different African leaders all across the continent. And for the same purpose that someone who has, for the same purpose that a lost individual traces back his steps in order to find his way, I think it is important that when we talk about the rise of Africa, we also talk about the fall of Africa, and first look at how Africa fell in order to raise it. The fall of Africa can be divided into three stages. The first being the classical antiquity, and that is the Greco-Roman influence on the northern region of Africa. And then the second is the Arab conquest. This is characterized by the rise of the merchants and the slave traders in Africa. And then the third, which is, I think, is the most important, and this is what we mainly think about when we think about colonialism in Africa, is the European colonialism. And I think in order now, when we're trying to raise Africa and reverse the fall of Africa, I think it is important to understand that European colonialism was not primarily driven by the hatred of the natives, but rather it was for economic gain for the Arab countries and for the Arab and European countries and their people at the cost of Africa and her sons and daughters. So it was enforced to extract the riches of this continent in order to enrich Europe and to strengthen the empires of the European countries. And it is for this reason that Dr. Mzugisi Kobo, which is a South African political analyst and a lecturer, a political science lecturer at the University of Pretoria, he says that someone that is politically free but is not economically free is not free at all. And going on to my next point, when we look at the fall of Africa, I think it is also important that we must look at the mechanisms used by the European colonizers in order to disempower and to conquer the African people. They used two very important mechanisms. The first one, the first mechanism was to create greater rifts between the African people. The first mechanism was to create greater rifts between the African people and create division between them because there is weakness in division. And then the second mechanism, which is more important than the first one, was to make the African people feel inferior and to make them believe that they are inferior to the European colonizers. And now it was made for them to feel ashamed of their African culture and everything that has to do with them being African, from their pigment, from the color of their skin, from any way, from part of their living, and everything that has to do with African. And at that time, I think, because now we're more developed, and I think Africa is a more diverse continent. So then, now having said all of this, I think it raises very important questions that we should ask ourselves. That if the fall of Africa was largely due to economic gain for the European countries at the expense of Africa, how can we truly speak of a rising Africa if people of this continent remain impoverished and the African countries are amongst the top raters in they have the largest Gini coefficients, and the fact that they have large Gini coefficients, it just means that they are one of the most unequal, economically unequal countries in the world. So you have, if in the same country you have extremely poor people and you have extremely rich people, and they are divided by the class. And how can we truly speak of a rising Africa if people from different countries in the same continent continue to slaughter one another, and there is intense animosity between the people of this country, of this continent? And how can we truly speak of a rising Africa if people of this continent do not have a culture of their own? And if they do have a culture of their own, it seems to be one that they are not proud of. And I believe that, okay, I'm not going to be completely pessimistic in my talk, but I believe we should acknowledge some of the great strides that Africa has took towards its success, from the independence of Ghana, which is Africa's first republic in 1960, to the recently launched Tunisian Truth and Dignity Commission, which is perceived to be promising and is regarded as a great success for the country. But now, I believe that it seems that with every great stride that Africa takes towards its rising, we seem to take a greater leap backwards. Because now, leaders of our continents that were once perceived as struggle heroes become perceived as public enemies in a blink of an eye. We make our struggle heroes, we make them leaders of the new republics. In order, it seems as if we're compensating them for the contributions that they made towards the struggle, you know. And it seems that in order for them to compensate themselves even further, they seem to be consumed by corruption. And this is the first hindrance to the rise of Africa. The second hindrance is that even though our leaders are aware of the necessary steps they take towards transitional justice in a new republic, so the necessary steps in a new republic are first the enforcement of truth commissions, and then secondly is the changing of state institutions. That would be your police forces, the government, and so forth. The third thing is that the third step is the change in public policies and the laws in order to ensure that whatever happened does not happen again in the new republic. And then the fourth step is remembrance. This is the building of monuments. This is the changing of street names, of town names, and commemorating all the heroes that were part of the struggle. So even though our leaders, they know the necessary steps towards this, we as the people become content even though these are applied poorly. An example of this is the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In a horrible regime, which is apartheid, which has existed for 46 years, and in an entire country for 46 years, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was only able to identify a ridiculous number of about 17,000 victims of apartheid. And this is what we were content with. This is what we were happy with. And we kept moving forward, even though we know that the implementation of these steps to transitional justice were applied very poorly, you know. So I believe that in order to have a rising Africa, and in order to reverse the fall of Africa, as we have perceived, as I have explained it, I believe that Africans should first of all they should strive for economic freedom. They should work towards economic freedom in order to be completely free. Second of all, I think Africans of all African countries, we should be unified. You know, we should be one, and we should strive towards uplifting one another as individuals and on an international level. And I believe that we should work together as different countries in order to uplift the continent as a whole. And I believe that in order to reverse the fall of Africa and to raise the continent, I believe that Africans should identify themselves with their African culture, and it should be a culture that we are proud of. And only then, when we are starting to achieve all of these, I think we can truly and honestly speak of a rising Africa. Thank you very much.
Hi, so we have a 10-minute break. Please feel free to go get water, go to the restroom, check your phones, anything like that. And after that, we have some performance. Be excited. Woo!
Living up, living up, living up. Ain't that easy? Living up. Ain't that easy? Living up. Living up. Living up. Living up. Mama,
For our founder, Fred.
I vividly remember being woken up in the middle of the night and gathering the few belongings we could and walking for about 2 hours to a safe house. For a week, we slept under our beds because we were worried that bullets might fly through the window. Then at the age of 8, we moved to Botswana. This time, it was different. There were no coups, everything worked, great education. They had such good infrastructure that even at the time we had a fiber optic telephone system, long before it had reached Western countries. The only thing they didn't have is that they didn't have their own national television station. And so I remember watching the apartheid struggle. But he didn't. He refused to do that until he actually achieved his objective of freeing South Africa from apartheid. And I remember feeling how just one good leader could make such a big difference in Africa. Then at the age of 12, my family sent me to high school in Zimbabwe. Initially, this too was amazing. Growing economy, excellent infrastructure, and it seemed like it was a model for economic development in Africa. I graduated from high school in Zimbabwe. I went into college. 6 years later, I returned to the country. Everything was different. It had shattered into pieces. Millions of people had emigrated. The economy was in a shambles, and it seemed all of a sudden that 30 years of development had been wiped out. How could a country go so bad so fast? Most people will agree that it's all because of leadership. One man, President Robert Mugabe, is almost single-handedly responsible for having destroyed this country. Now, all these experiences of living in different parts of Africa, growing up, did two things to me. The first is it made me fall in love with Africa. Everywhere I went, I experienced the wonderful beauty of our continent and saw the resilience and the spirit of our people. And at the time, I realized that I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to making this continent great. But I also realized that making Africa great would require us addressing this issue of leadership. You see, all these countries I lived in, the coup d'etats and the corruption I'd seen in Ghana and Gambia and in Zimbabwe, contrasted with the wonderful examples I'd seen in Botswana and in South Africa of good leadership, made me realize that Africa would rise or fall because of the quality of our leaders. Now, one might think, of course, leadership matters everywhere. But if there's one thing you take away from my talk today, it is this. In Africa, more than anywhere else in the world, the difference that just one good leader can make is much greater than anywhere else. And here's why. It's because in Africa we have weak institutions, like the judiciary, the constitution, civil society, and so forth. So here's a general rule of thumb that I believe in. When societies have strong institutions, the difference that one good leader can make is limited. Can make or break that country. Let me make it a bit more concrete. You the United States. You think, wow, I've arrived. I'm the most powerful man in the world. So you decide, perhaps let me pass a law. All of a sudden, Congress taps you on the shoulder and says, no, you can't do that. You say, let me try this way. The Senate comes and says, we don't think you can do that. You say, perhaps let me print some money. I think the economy needs a stimulus. The central bank government will think you're crazy. You might get impeached for that. But if you become the president of Zimbabwe, and you say, I really like this job. I think I'd like to stay in it forever. Well, you just can. You decide you want to print money, you call the central bank governor and say, please, double the money supply. He'll say, okay, yes, sir. Is there anything else I can do for you? This is the power that African leaders have. And this is why they make the most difference in the continent. The good news is that the quality of leadership in Africa has been improving. We have three generations of leaders in my mind. Generation one are those who appeared in the 50s and 60s. These are people like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. The legacy they left is that they brought independence to Africa. They freed us from colonialism, and let's give them credit for that. They were followed by generation two. These are people that brought nothing but havoc to Africa. Think warfare, corruption, human rights abuses. This is the stereotype of the typical African leader that we typically think of. Mobutu Sese Seko from Zaire, Sani Abacha from Nigeria. The good news is that most of these leaders have moved on, and they were replaced by generation three. These are people like the late Nelson Mandela, and most of the leaders that we see in Africa today, like Paul Kagame and so forth. Now, these leaders are by no means perfect. But the one thing they have done is that they've cleaned up much of the mess of Generation 2. They've stopped the fighting. And I call them the stabilizer generation. They're much more accountable to their people. They've improved macroeconomic policies. And we're seeing for the first time Africa's growing. In fact, it's the second fastest growing economic region in the world. So these leaders are by no means perfect, but they are by and large the best leaders we've seen in the last 50 years. So where to from here? I believe that the next generation to come after this, Generation 4, has a unique opportunity to transform the continent. Specifically, they can do two things that previous generations have not done. The first thing they need to do is they need to create prosperity for the continent. Why is prosperity so important? Because none of the previous generations have been able to tackle this issue of poverty. Africa today has the fastest growing population in the world, but also is the poorest. By 2030, Africa will have a larger workforce than China, and by 2050, it'll have the largest workforce in the world. 1 billion people will need jobs in Africa. So if we don't grow our economies fast enough, we're sitting on a ticking time bomb, not just for Africa, but for the entire world. Let me show you an example of one person who's living up to this legacy of creating prosperity. Letitia. Letitia is a young woman from Kenya who at the age of 13 had to drop out of school because her family couldn't afford to pay fees for her. So she started her own business, rearing rabbits, which happened to be a delicacy in this part of Kenya that she's from. This business did so well that within a year she was employing 15 women and was able to generate enough income that she was able to send herself to school, and through these women, fund another 65 children to go to school. The profits that she generated, she used that to build a school. And today, she educates 400 children in her community. And she's just turned 18. Another example is Eric Rajanari. Eric comes from the island of Madagascar. Now, Eric realized that agriculture would be the key to creating jobs in the rural areas of Madagascar. But he also realized that fertilizer was a very expensive input for most farmers in Madagascar. And Madagascar has these very special bats that produce these droppings that are very high in nutrients. In 2006, Eric quit his job as a chartered accountant and started a company to manufacture fertilizer from the bat droppings. Today, Eric has built a business that generates $7 million of revenue. And he employs 70 people full-time and another 800 people during the season when the bats drop their droppings the most. Now, what I like about this story is that it shows that opportunities to create prosperity can be found almost anywhere. Eric is known as the Batman. And who would have thought that you would be able to build a multi-million-dollar business employing so many people just from bat poo? The second thing that this generation needs to do is to create our institutions. They need to build these institutions such that we're never held to ransom again by a few individuals like Robert Mugabe. Now, all this sounds great, but where are we going to get this generation from? Do we just sit and hope that they emerge by chance, or that God gives them to us? No. I don't think so. It's too important an issue for us to leave it to chance. I believe that we need to create African institutions, homegrown, that will identify and develop these leaders in a systematic, practical way. We've been doing this for the last 10 years through the African Leadership Academy. Letitia is one of our young leaders. Today we have 700 of them that are being groomed for the African continent. And over the next 15 years we expect to create 6,000 of them. But one thing has been troubling me. We get about 4,000 applications a year for 100 young leaders that we could take into this academy. And so I saw a tremendous hunger that existed for this leadership training that we're offering. But we could.
Hello, everyone. Okay, are you guys smiling? Are you guys okay? Cool. We've heard a lot of strong, very strong messages today, and what I hope to do with this performance is just to help you guys chill. So I'm singing a song by my namesake, Ella Fitzgerald, and it's called Sunshine of Your Love. Yes, we can relate the song to Africa, although it's not technically related to Africa, but let's say Africa has a lot of sun, right? And we're in the sunshine of this love for Africa. Sit back and enjoy. David. It's getting near dawn. When lights close a tired eye, I'll soon be with you, my darling, and give you my dawn surprise. I'll be with you soon, my darling. Be with you when the stars start falling. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Can you hear me calling? I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love. come on, sunshine. I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going in the sunshine of your love. Woo, come on, baby. You hear me screaming for my baby. Ooh, yes, I'm waiting for you, baby. Woo, yeah. I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going. Oh, I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going. Oh, I've been waiting so long, baby. In the sunshine of your love. Your love. Your love. Your love.
Hi everyone, that was amazing, Ella. You are amazing. So I'd like to introduce our next two singers, Oscar and DK. Please put your hands together. Woo!
Good day. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I go by the name of Oscar Boy. This is the Ghetto Elephant. Yeah, and we're here to sing a song. So we invite you to sit back and relax. Yeah. Yeah. Nanti ngome buhlanti kuvume nabaphansi besithi eyisani kutheni ungeka mthathi nathi yo ndingi right yena ungowami kodwa kukhona ingxaki utata kanti funa nazi ngome buhlanti kuvume nabaphansi besithi eyisani kutheni Datio, Wati, Yenau, Wami, Godagu, Koningaki, Dada, Kagani Funi, Datin Sasheli Panti, Gonti, Ajula, Naleo, Togazi. Kondiyo kamanzi ezanti yamlanjeni nasona lamnanda ilandela njengohleva waseGauteng nasondela molosan cekuhamba nawo hello chichana ndivumele ndithetha nandi uDK ekhaya ekhala ka Olifani inkosi lentiko zinkosazana yami bami isandla sami sendwa sami zoba ngumama wabantwana bami ndiyazibuza umhle kangaka ukhetha mina madoda engangi ngizawubiza utata wami na ubiza utata bahlale phansi bobabili nazi ngome buhlanti kuvume nabaphansi besithi eyisani kutheni ngingamthathi ndathi yo ndingi right yena ungowami kodwa kukhona ingxaki utata kakandifuni utata kakandifuni akandifuni utata kakandifuni akandifuni utata kakandifuni utata kakandifuni utata kakandifuni akandifuni malibongwe ma libongwe ma alibongwe ma libongwe 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 libongwe ma, libongwe, libongwe ma, libongwe ma, libongwe ma, libongwe na 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 na. Children of the struggle, born and raised in a shack, not just any shack, but a shack that has been stumbled, crumbled, and yet put again. With their mother's tears and perseverance, their father's sweat and strength, they were proud to be children of the struggle. As they woke up in cold, dark winter mornings, taking a bath in cold, freezing water because there wasn't enough firewood. But potata katie ento bobe ba malo masonja, matafani ni buroto ba odi aki. They want to be children of the struggle.
Colored or Indian, but this is a significant color of me being an African. The breeze that I get from the Atlantic Ocean, the steep that I travel from the Kilimanjaro mountain, standing tall and saying proud, I am an African. Utlala mirupa, uleri trompita, I'm Africa. I am African. Africa my beginning.
Libongwe ma, libongwe, libongwe ma, libongwe, libongwe ma, libongwe, libongwe ma, libongwe.
Again, and Tina. So next up we have the closest thing we have to Mr. Sonic on campus. He's from Zimbabwe. He's bald again, and he's here to speak about youth. Wait, Keith. Feel free.
One testing. Okay. Writing and rhetoric ruined my life. Writing and rhetoric ruined my life because before walking into my writing and rhetoric class, I had a plan. I had a plan of how my life was going to be, and I knew what I needed to do to get there. I was going to come to the African Leadership Academy for 2 years, study math, biology, and chemistry. And then after that, I was going to go study medicine for 7 years. By the time I was 25, I was going to be able to graduate, buy myself a Jaguar, and stay in an upstate apartment. However, this plan came to nothing. This plan came to nothing after we started talking about things that I had never thought about before in my writing and rhetoric class. We spoke about what it meant to be African and young. We spoke about how as a young person, I could contribute to the conversation that was already happening on the continent. It made me think about what my role as a young person was on this continent, what my role in the society that I was coming from Zimbabwe was. Now, honestly speaking, these were things that had crossed my mind, but I never paid attention to. These were things I thought were great ideals, but I never really committed myself to. What was on my mind was chasing the jaguar and the upstate apartment. However, through reading authors such as Nyavanga Wainaina from Kenya and Chimamanda Adichie from Nigeria and Sadawi from Egypt, I began to realize how these authors were using words to change my mindset. How these authors were using their articles and their voices to compel and impact me. I then started writing extensively outside of class. Every chance I got, I would write. In prep, during class, in my math class, every chance I got. I would share my articles with my roommate and my friend, and I'm pretty sure that at some point they were getting frustrated, but they were good friends, so they didn't mind listening. One day I shared my article with Miss Kathleen, and she said, "Keith, I've noticed you're writing a lot outside of class. Have you decided maybe sharing your articles and your conversations for a larger audience?" I was like, "How will I do this?" She said, "Have you decided about starting a blog?" I laughed. And I was like, "Miss Kathleen, there's no way I'm starting a blog. I've read blogs, they have followers, and me writing a blog meant I had to have good sentence structure. And I had to watch my commas, and I wasn't ready to do that." And she told me, "Just think about it." I went back to my room and I told my roommate, "Miss Kathleen says I should start a blog. What do you think?" My friend walked in and they were both like, "Okay, dude, you already bore us with your articles. Why not bore more people?" So I decided, why not? So my blog began with 1 post and 0 followers. Today, my blog has 53 posts and 887 followers. What I realized from writing my blog were 2 things. The first thing was that I had a responsibility. I had a responsibility now in thinking of how my words were impacting the person who was reading. But secondly, and most importantly, I realized that I had an opportunity. I now had the opportunity to channel the discourse that I wanted. I now had the opportunity to engage more people in conversations and questions that had been on my mind. And I seized this opportunity. Towards the end of the year, we had what Mr. Ted, who is a staff faculty on campus, called Do Something Cool. Do Something Cool was a period of 2 days where you would get to put aside all your assignments and work and concentrate on doing something creative, something you'd never gotten to do because of the work that you had been meeting throughout the course of the year. I took this opportunity to write a book, something I'd never done before. I didn't know exactly what my book was going to be about, but I knew that it had to communicate the person I was becoming, and that I knew that the message I wanted to get across were questions that I was asking myself and questions I felt more people should be talking about. So I wrote about a young boy called Tamu. Tamu is 16 and comes from a small town in Zimbabwe. He gets an opportunity to go study at international school in Harare. Upon arriving in Harare, Tamu realizes that the people who he's looked up to and this prestigious school is run by a corrupt system. The headmaster or principal is propelling propaganda for the ruling party to encourage students to vote for the ruling party. The students themselves are paying teachers so that they can pass them and they can pass their A-levels. Outside of the school, Tamu realizes that the citizens themselves are not happy. Unemployment is high, electricity is not in full supply, and there's no clean water. Tamu hears people whispering and complaining about what's going on, but no one is doing anything. No one is standing up to speak and say, this is not right and we should do something. Tamu feels that citizens of this country, which is imaginary, have to do something. They have to rise up and speak out. But he feels that for this to happen, there is a need for a radical decision to shock people into action. In Tamu's mind, the only radical decision he can think of is to assassinate the president. So the book ends right after Tamu assassinates the president. I ended the book here for 2 reasons. The first reason was that after sitting down for 48 hours and writing 7,000 words, my fingers were numb and my back hurt very bad. The second reason was that I wanted the reader to think about what would happen to the citizens living in Tamu's world. Would they now rise up and take ownership of their country after their president has been assassinated? Or would they remain complacent? Or would the opposition party come into power and start ruling the people, for better or for worse? In my mind, getting the reader to start thinking about these questions would also subsequently get the reader to think about their role in society. It would get the reader to think about what they were doing in their own country or society and how they were owning their responsibility as a citizen. Were they contributing their voice, and were they holding people in government accountable? After writing Tamu's Purpose, I knew for a fact that I was giving up the Jaguar and the upstate apartment. So I went back home and I told my dad. I told my dad that I had decided I wanted to study English in college and I wanted to become a writer. To give you some context, my dad has raised me since the time I was 7, single-handedly. He was there when I first went to school for the very first time. He was there when I did my very first public speaking. He was there when I got selected into the national team for rugby. My dreams were his dreams, and he supported me right through everything. The dream of becoming a doctor was not only my dream, but it was his dream as well. So I understood when he was angry and furious and told me that there was no way a son of his was going to become an author. But I also knew that I had come to a place where the Jaguar and the upstate apartment were not things I wanted anymore in my life. What I wanted to do was something more. I wanted to have a space and create the opportunity to talk to young people like me and you, to communicate and encourage and compel people to move into action, to speak about issues that I felt people were not talking about, issues that make us feel uncomfortable on the continent. The way I see it, living in Africa is like sitting next to a fat person on a plane. I say this because when you sit next to this person, you're polite, you put on your earphones, and you don't say anything, although they're taking up your space and making you feel like this journey is really going to take long. However, we cannot afford to be the polite person sitting next to a fat person on a plane in Africa, because this plane is never landing. So we need to address the issues that make us feel uncomfortable. We need to start the conversation early. Us as young people need to realize that the people with the most power on the continent are us, not anyone else. I then went on to do some research to find out if I was the only person who was chasing this ideal of using my skill to communicate for impact, to bring about social, political change. I found out that I was not the only person. In Kenya, there's a young man called Boniface Mwangi. Boniface Mwangi is a world-renowned photographer. Before he became a world-renowned photographer, Boniface was going to be ordained as a priest. Boniface says the thing that stopped him from being ordained as a priest was that once he started taking pictures, he realized that taking photographs started an restlessness that religion could not curb. He said that if God called him to be a preacher, he was going to preach using his photographs for change. Boniface identifies himself as an activist. He then went on to start a non-profit organization that communicates to young people in Kenya and conscientizes them on their role as active citizens in their community. Boniface calls out to members of parliament in Kenya who are not delivering on their promises or people who are falling short. I was inspired when I read Boniface's story, but I wanted to still find more. So I came across a young woman, a poet called Vangi Ganchwa. Vangi is a South African poet who uses her art to communicate a message for social change. I listened to her perform one of her poems called I Expect More From You. From the clicks, this poem is truly moving. In I Expect More From You, Vangi talks about how the ANC is not delivering on their promises that they've been promising people for the last 20 years. Vangi talks about how she finds it unfair that every 4 years, the ANC goes out to people and tells them, this next 4 years, you're going to be able to now afford a house. These next 4 years, you'll all be able to get good health care. But after you've put down that X on the ballot box, those promises don't come to fruition. And no one is doing anything. When I listened to her speak, I felt challenged. I felt challenged and I asked myself, what was I doing? What was I doing to hold the people who were making policies for me accountable? How was I taking ownership of my country? How was I taking ownership of being Zimbabwean or being African? I felt that everyone in that room should have been thinking about the same thing, of how were they making a sound in their community loud enough so that they could be heard. This took me back to a time when I was 5. When I was 5, my favorite pastime was coloring. My mother says I never listened to her or my teachers when it came to choosing which color to use when coloring in specific images. My people were orange, the trees were blue, and the sky was purple. This continued to happen till I was 8. And by this time, my mother thought that I was mentally unstable. However, my father called me a spirited soul. And I guess this was his way of calling his son crazy. But I have come to realize that in order to make a loud enough sound in this world, you have to color the sky purple. Over the last 10 years, there has been a significant growth on the continent of the artistic community. The Kwani Trust, which is a publishing house, covered a feature on the post-electoral violence in Kenya and looked at it from both sides. The Farafina Trust is also another publishing house run by Chimamanda Adichie, and they run summer workshops where they help young people who are trying to become authors every single summer. The Chumurenga magazine here in South Africa has become a controversial magazine that features authors from across the continent. Artistic activism is starting to gather momentum in Africa, and more people are beginning to challenge the traditional boundaries and hierarchies of culture. I believe that one cannot be an artist in Africa and not be an activist. Artistic activism is less about the artist and more about the citizen. It is more than just a song, a film, a piece of narrative. It is a form of protest. It is a form of protest that speaks to the youth of today. It is a form of protest that speaks to me and you and every single one of us. I am not only a citizen, but I am an artist. Writing and rhetoric did ruin my life, but I'm glad that it did. Today my book is on talks of getting published because I chose to take a stance and speak out. My art is my writing. I use words to color the sky purple and speak out. Not every single one of us here is an artistic activist, but every single one of us here should be an activist. Let us all color the sky purple. And Dad, this is why I want to be a writer. Thank you.
So much for spending your day with us. You've watched incredible performances. You've heard incredible talks. I am blown away by the talent exhibited by those who stood on this stage today. This event would not have been possible without the help of several people in the ALA community, and I'd like to take a moment to thank those people. First off, I'd like to thank Ms. Uzo and the Dean's Office for generously sponsoring tonight's dinner. I'd like to thank Ms. Haley and Tedxo for catering today's snacks, lunches, and tonight's dinner as well. I'd like to thank Mr. Penn for facilitating the live stream and recording of today's talks and performances. And I want to express my immense gratitude towards the TEDx team, especially Menkoba Katane, who did so much of the backstage work leading up to this event and has not yet been thanked. Thank you, I remember first seeing the application portal in my email and immediately typing up my statement and sending it off. When I was told I was on the team, I was thrilled because I knew I was about to begin something very special. And I was not wrong. This is very special. When I was chosen as the director of logistics, I knew that I was given the opportunity to develop my teamwork skills, my leadership skills, but more importantly, I was given the opportunity to showcase youth with big ideas. I don't think that this fact has been emphasized enough. This is a youth event, and everyone who spoke on the stage today, they're incredible. I want to thank the speakers for putting in so much time and effort.
In the week leading up to today's event. These admiral speakers put their all into their talks, and it clearly showed. I so admire and respect them for the bravery, dedication, and innovation they all have. A round of applause for our speakers, please. A few performers said this today, and I'm sure you've heard it before. There is so much power in our youth. The youth of Africa is the key to a prosperous continent. No one can deny that. That point is what stands as the foundation of this very academy you are all sitting in. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that we are being entrusted with our own futures. I'm grateful that we have huge ideas, that we think critically, that we are tolerant and compassionate and ambitious. I'm grateful that we are dreamers, that we have hope, that we see a thriving, prosperous Africa in our futures. And I'm grateful for the people of ALA who are making that future a reality every single day. And something as small as cleaning up the tables after dinner, and something as big as running a social venture to address poverty or education or any of the other amazing causes that the people of ALA are passionate about. Passion. It's a very important word. There is passion necessary for today's speakers to write their talks. There is passion necessary for the all-student TEDx team to make this event happen. There is passion necessary for you, the audience, to spend your Saturday with us, widening your worldview, listening attentively to the ideas of your peers and colleagues. And I'm thankful for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's step away from this thing so to go there to handle what goes on. Leaving in June next year. And being here today has made me very happy because we've set a stone here today. 3 years from now, we'll be able to look back on this day and say that today is the day that we started TEDx. Today is the day that we started sharing ideas and started talking about it. Today is the day that we made so many mistakes. One mistake is going on right now. But we're not afraid to look at it, take a break, and learn from it, and go forward. And I know this hasn't been the most perfect event, but I think we'll be able to see the fruits of everyone's hard work here. My team, you guys have done an amazing job. Throughout the whole process, the last second years we're having such a hard time going through our college apps and wondering what's going to happen for an event that's happening in a month. And these first days, even though it's their first 2 months of being in ALA, they're already doing an amazing job. This is only the start. Till next time, my name is Bradley. Well, we'll meet next time. My name goes there too. So this will be the last exhibit. They have me an next exhibit in June. And we hope to completely let go as second years and leave it to the first years. And you guys as first years, when you join second year, we hope that you leave it on to second year. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the audience for staying this long. I don't think we did go well. Never have a lovely night.
Special TEDx dinner. It's going to start at 5:25. So I hope to see you guys all there.
Thank